Kroeder, hello and welcome again to Kroeder Kroghen. And as I promised you last week, this week I'm going to spend most of my time telling you a very, very old Cornish story. It's called Johan Chianhorth, John of Chianor or Chianhorth, Ram's House, Pian 3 Fointe Skians, or the 3 Points of Wisdom. Now it was actually written in this Cornish language form somewhere between 1660 and 1670, 300 years ago, by Nicholas Boson of Newlyn, who wrote it down because he wanted to teach Cornish to his children, and he was anxious that Cornish was starting to die out, and so he wanted to make sure that they had good Cornish copy to learn. The story was later written out by Edward Llwyd, the Welsh antiquary who visited Cornwall in 1700, and he printed it in 1707. And from then, various copies and versions of the story were kept going until in 1929, Robert Morton Nance produced a version of it in his unified spelling, modern Cornish spelling, with an English translation. Now, I'm ably assisted in telling the story today by Trev Lawrence, who improvises a little away from the Cornish text, but I think gives it a distinct flavour all of his own. It's a rather complicated story, and in fact I shall only be telling you the first part of the story today. So here it is. Johan Chianhorth, P and 3 Fointe Skians. In terminus pacis, a thegia trigus in St. Leven, Dain habennen, in tilla crees Chianhorth, han whale a goddess scant, hagen meth and dain den rik, me and vin moos the wheelas whalewu.
Newly married, thinking about his family, thought, well, darn it, there isn't much work down this way. I better traipse away a bit and see if I can find something elsewhere. So off he goes and says his fond farewells to his wife, and eventually ends up in East Cornwall, where he was very, very fortunate to find employment on a farm. Of course, he had his interview and so on and so forth, and the farmer asked him what he could do. Oh, he said, I can plough, I can sow, I can reap and mow like all good farmers do. He said, I can do anything you want to do on the farm. Well, the farmer said, well, all right, my handsome, he said. I'll give you a job for 12 months. £3 a year. Now, £3 a year, that was 300 years ago. Nowadays, I suppose, with inflation and everything, that'd be about £10, £12 a year. But here we are now, £3 a year he was given. And he settled down and all his board and lodgings paid. And he worked very well, and the farmer was pleased with him. At the end of the first 12 months, the farmer said, there you are, Johan, he said. Here is your pay. £3. He said, but, he said, if you care to give me the £3 back, I will give you a point of wisdom. Well, Johan, now he'd been away for 12 months.
Na mees i vester. Roedd ddim ha mi yn lefelis. Cemr e thw yn mees Johan. En mees i vester. Cemr wyth na reit a gaza an vorth cwth rag an vorth noweth.
Never leave the old road for the new. Well, thank you very much, Johan said, and went on with his second year's work. Farmer was much appreciated, see, and thought £3 a year, I'm all right here. At the end of the second year, Johan had been out ploughing, sowing, reaping, mowing. And the farmer called at the end of the second year and says, my handsome, he said, here's your second year's wages, as agreed. £3. Well, thank you very much, Johan said, that's very nice of you. And the farmer said, Johan, he said, you've worked very well on the farm this year, he said. Very, very pleased with you. He said, if you'd like to give me your wages back, he said, I'll give you another point of wisdom.
En mees i vester.
Well, Johan hadn't missed the £3.
Cemr wyth na reit a ostia yn chi, mae fo dein cwth dymeddys the venom yoink.
Farmer said, your second point of wisdom, my handsome, he said. Never lodge in a dwelling house where an old man has married a young woman. Well, thank you very much, Johan said, and set off back in the fields again. End of another 12 months in which the farmer had been very, very pleased. He called Johan over and he said, Johan, he said, your 3 years is up, he said. Here's your third year's wages, £3. Well, thank you, my handsome, said Johan. So the farmer said, "You've done very well," he said, "and I know that you're keen to get home to see your family," he said, "your wife," he said, "but," he said, "before you go," he said, "if you'd like to give me your wages," he said, "I'll give you another point of wisdom."
Bydd gwesgus diwedd, Ken's gwesgl unwaith. Rhaid hen yw yn gwela point a skians all.
Yes, he says, "Go on here, here's me wages back." The farmer said, "Well, thank you, Yowen," he said, "your last point of wisdom." He said, "Think twice before striking once." "Well, thank you very much," Yowen said, thinking, what am I going to do now? I'm going to go home and no money or nothing. But he said, "I suppose it's worth it to go home and see the wife." Well, that night, before he packed up to go, the farmer and his wife fed Yowen up, and as a special surprise for Yowen, the farmer's wife made him a cake. She said, "There you are, Yowen, that's to take home to your wife. But you're not to cut it until you're settled back nice and handsome and happy." "Well, thank you very much," Yowen said, not thinking he was going to have a bit of cake to take home with him. So the following morning early he set off back home. And what with all the new motors...
How wordt je the Greek doos the wind St. Hiller, again ever wages gans 3 merchant a drurin. Teasy bluev, o toes 3, mes en fer caresk. A Johan medden sie, diw kennen ni, lowen on ni dagus gwellis wi, ple festa marbel. In meid Johan, mira be o servia ha lemon edge of almost 3 them Greek.
Yowen thought a minute, he said, "Hang on a minute, shortcut. Never leave the old road for the new." "No," he said, "I know which way I'm going." He said, "I'm going to carry on." And they left him on this here supposed shortcut. Hadn't gone no very far, he says, and heard all this here screeching and wailing going on, and darnay, I better go and see what's going on. And Yowen cut across a few fields and found these old friends of his had been attacked by bandits and what have you, robbing them of all their money and everything. Well, darnay, he soon sorted they out. He was old Raster, see. He's got they sorted out and says, "Come on, my handsome, come back to the old road, the road that we know." And so they came back, went on with Yowen. Well, end of the next day, they was very nearly home, but Yowen was feeling very, very tired, and he says, "I'd better have a bit of a breather," he said. "Go home fresh." He said, "I'm going to stop overnight in Marazion." So he thought, yes.
Lay my coath here there the yost, yeah. In meid Johan, meer dal gwellis en oostenchi. En oostenchi medden sie? Pander of into gulgens en oostenchi. Ome mag en oostesni, ha joink je he. Maar minter gwellis en oostenchi, keden gegen. Again a tea
in a lodging house that has got an old man married with a young woman. He said, "Can I see your husband, please, my handsome?" She says, "Well, I don't know what difference that's going to make, but he's out there in the kitchen." So he went through into the kitchen. There was this here wizened old man sitting down, scrumped up like a edgy boar over a pan of potatoes, and he was peeling the potatoes, and he's an old man, and she's a young lady. And he said, "I'm sorry, my handsome," he says, "but I cannot stay in your house."
Thank you, Trev, and we'll leave the story at that point, and I'll finish it off for you next week. Johan Chianhorth. And now to finish with something entirely different. Nepeth diffrans in Tian Deliverasons in Monty Python. Except that I suppose the only connection with Cornish is that all the evidence seems to be that when Cornish was spoken very widely over the whole of Cornwall in the Middle Ages, it was spoken very, very rapidly. And this is a piece of singing by Norman MacLean in Scots Gaelic. The song is called Puirte Buil, and it contains some of the most rapidly sung lyrics I've ever heard in a piece of music.
Mihinnes tu hen o hen, mihinnes tu hen a vod, mihinnes tu hen o hen, gudinja mihins tu hen a vod, grem alt de dek mehenet, a chayeter mis malaman, noede galamin lesh kapale, go hachar aramach mor, mihinnes tu hen o hen, mihinnes tu hen a vod, mihinnes tu hen o hen, gudinja mihins tu hen a vod. Arsengo fodi chamet chatsengo falamit sengo additional when I has a vector so to kurafuga hudi si yellen mon yalan mon yalan mon and if coming up yellen mon yalan mon and if coming up Fedin fetter volle made, fedin fetter volle made, jongen en pikken made, fedin met grisje de daar in de made, net de dingen zie je in de man, je laat de man, je laat de man, en wie kan ik op die in de man, je laat de man, je laat de man, en wie kan ik op. Hat orshin tat on the shaw, hat orshin tat on the shaw, hat orshin tat on the shaw, kala rocket met de diak, on a chiku caravana, motion is the epic and class, if it in it too, and a yam in the madig, net the ding, see yell in the mon, you land the mon, you land the mon, and a victory of the yell in the mon, you land the mon, you land the mon, and a victory of the yell in the mon, you land the mon, you land the mon, and a victory of the yell in the mon, you land the mon, you land the mon. O henne vecchionai
Norman MacLean there, a bit like singing all the verses of Trelawney in 34 seconds. Well, that's all for this week. Marasta fi orga slois ortha fi matata. Ha, du ganachwi. God be with you. Du ganachwi.